What is the big deal with the resurrection? Well, the big deal is Jesus rose from the dead, and that brought power to people to change the world. Today, I want to talk about some of the secondary benefits of the resurrection, the resurrection literally changed history for the whole planet. Let me give you several examples. Number one, the resurrection changed the way people valued human life. Prior to Jesus resurrecting from the dead, human life was not considered all that important. The dead were either thrown into the streets or burned, and their bodies sold to the poor for food. It was such that in remote cultures, cannibals, people would eat the bodies of their enemies that they had defeated. Human life had little or no value. Children would be aborted easily. Yet the resurrection changed that. Christians began to value human life, and that showed up, number two, in the way they began to treat children. Jesus valued children. He invited all the children to come to him, but that wasn't the way it was in the Roman world. Children were literally slaves to their parents until that status might be changed when they became a teenager, if the dad so decided. Children had no rights. They had no privileges. They could easily be aborted. They could be killed, and the parents would not be punished. They could be abandoned. If the child was deformed or sick or had any other handicaps, the child would be left out in the wilderness to die. Children were not valued at all in the Roman world prior to the resurrection of Jesus. But Christianity changed all of that. Now we value and love children. We realize what a precious, precious gift they are to us. The resurrection changed how people began to view children. The resurrection also changed how we viewed slavery. Do you realize that half the population of the city of Rome in the first century were slaves? They had no rights, no privileges. They could be killed or beaten by their master with no punishment. People were treated as slaves. Now, Christianity changed that, and eventually Rome had no slaves. Think about this. Even though it took a long time for America to figure it out, when the anti-slavery movement got strong, the abolition movement, I'm happy to say that 2/3 of the people in that movement were Christian pastors, because they understood that the resurrection means that everyone should be treated equally and we should have no slaves. A fourth benefit of the resurrection is this. It changed the way women were treated. Women were treated about like property to their husbands in the first century. They didn't have rights, privileges. They couldn't vote. They could be beaten by their husband. They could be even killed by their husband without penalty. They were treated very, very poorly, but Jesus, in the way he treated women, in the respectful way he treated them, Jesus changed the way people viewed women. The resurrection changed history. Beyond that, the resurrection changed how we thought about the poor. Prior to Christianity, no one cared about the poor. It was said in Rome, no one gives anything to anyone. But Christians came along and they began to serve the poor, feed the poor, house the poor. Christianity changed the way we treat the poor. Now, literally billions of dollars from churches goes to feed the poor and the homeless, to clothe them, to house them, to care for them. Why? Because Jesus values people, all people, including poor people. The resurrection also changed how we treat prisoners and the people who are sick. Think about this. The only hospitals that existed in the first century were for soldiers or gladiators to get them back into the battle, to get them back into the fight. An ordinary person, if they got sick, there was no hospital to send them to. Do you realize the first hospitals were created by Christians? Do you realize that the first hospitals in the United States were all created by Christians? Do you realize that, in fact, 325 AD, the leaders of the church decided that Christians should go into every town and not only start a church, but start a hospital. Why? Because Christians cared for sick people, all people. Christianity changed that. The last one I want to tell you about is Christianity changed the whole view of education. It used to be education was only available to the elite, the very rich, the very powerful. Only a few people in a population could be educated. Christians came along and said everybody needs to be educated. The Sunday school movement was started to teach children the Bible who had no opportunity to learn to read. Even public education in the United States all started from Christianity. It was started to teach children how to read the Bible. Now, public education in our country has gotten far from Christianity, but that doesn't change the fact that it was Christians that started education for the masses. Why? Why did all these things change? How we view women and children and prisoners and slaves and the poor and the sick and the uneducated. Why did that all change? Because the resurrection changed it. Christianity changed it. Jesus changed it. And Jesus wants to change your life so you can be used of Him to change your world for the gospel of Jesus Christ.